Welcome to Cheap Controls. We make videos on things that we struggled with, hoping to help you so you don't. Consider subscribing and hitting that bell. In this week's video, I'm going to build upon one I did a little while ago where I detected SSIDs in the ESP32 and displayed them in I think a multi-text field or something on the Nextion. In this one, I'm going to populate a combo box, and then we're going to be able to dynamically select the network we want to connect to it, and then I'm going to have this little button up in the upper right hand corner, radio button, and it'll show whether we're connected or not. I'm going to start in the Arduino for this one, and then we'll go to the Nextion and then back to the Arduino. Now for this one, I've mainly done my videos on the Arduino, so I refer to the ESP as the Arduino quite often. And since I have this basic setup built for the Arduino Nano, I'm going to use it, and all I have to do is comment out a couple lines, but it also works well with the Nextion display and the input from the Nextion. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this delay length from 1 second to 10. That way I don't flood the serial monitor. We're going to be sending a lot of information out the serial monitor as we go over some error states and some configuration things you might run into when you're using the ESP32 and connecting to a network. And then since we're not using the Nano, the ESP32 has a serial port 2 built into it, so I can comment these lines out. And then we're going to add this Wi-Fi library, this Wi-Fi.h, and we'll use it throughout. I said in the last video, there's lots of different ways to do the ESP32 and connect it to Wi-Fi and stuff, so I'm showing you just my way. There are other ways. And then I'm going to have two variables, SSID name and SSID password, and that's where I'm going to store the SSID and the password, and then we'll use those when we join the network. I am storing them as simple strings and not character arrays, so we'll have to manipulate that when we go to assign them. And what I'm going to initially assign them to is no name and no pass, and that way you'll see them in the serial monitor. I'm going to have two networks that you can connect to, Cheap Controls and Engineering. Well, not that you can connect to, that all connect to. And the password for Cheap Controls is controls, and the password for Engineering is test. And I haven't actually done it where I've switched between the two. And I've saved doing this, switching between the Cheap Controls and Engineering to do during the video, and I haven't tested it beforehand to see if it will break going between two legitimate networks. So I thought it'd be fun to do it now and just to have a little contest with me and the editor. I think it'll work. He's not so sure. Now down here in the setup, the onboard LED for the Nano is 13, but for the ESP it's pin 2. So I just change it to 2. And the way that I have it set up, just to make it easier, is I have different tabs for each part of my program. I have an input function, which is over on the input tab, and then I have a delay function, which is in the delay tab. And then this function down here we won't be using in this video. Now in my delay function, if I'm not using the onboard LED, I use that as an indicator to make sure that the delay is working properly. But in this case I have to change the 13 to 2. And I have to change this 13 to 2 also. And then we're going to print out the SSID name and the SSID password, which is going to start off with no name and no password. And hopefully we'll be able to collect this information from the Nextion display. Well, first we'll collect it and put it up to the Nextion display, and then we'll be able to select it on the display and send it back down to the Arduino. In the next step, we're just going to print the local IP. So whatever currently the ESP32 has for an IP address, we'll print it out. And then after that, we're going to print the status, the current Wi-Fi status. And you can see that I have them listed here. Now I have this code. I'll have it when it's all done. I'll have it up on the Cheap Controls website, and you can go and download it there. So I've included these states in here. There's another state, 255, which is kind of the initial state, but the ones that to really pay attention to are 0 through 6. I'm not going to go over them right now. You'll see them pop up as we go. And then on the last line, I'm going to, if the Wi-Fi status equals a certain thing, we're going to do a certain thing, because I want it to show up on the Nextion display if we're connected or disconnect. I'm going to upload this now and show it to you in the serial monitor. And now I have it uploaded, and you can see no name, no pass, and then the IP address, which it doesn't have anything yet, and the status of 255. And it'll have that status until we try to connect or do something to the Wi-Fi on the ESP32, which we haven't done any coding for that yet. So now I'm going to switch over to the Nextion and I can show you that. So what I have on the Nextion is I have this combo box right here, and I have it starting up just showing 1, and then I have the background of it, or the list, being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you can see that here in the multi-line. And I do have it set up as a global in the scope, and that way, because when we do the password down here, when we enter that, we're going to click on that, and that's going to bring up a keypad, and when we do that, it refreshes the page. So I don't want to lose what I have in that combo box when I click down here. And you do that by setting the scope as global, and on the key you select this full QWERTY keyboard. You have your option of none, and that just shows it as a text box, and then you can do numeric, or you can do with the full QWERTY. I have this radio button over here, and I have both the colors set to red, and I'm going to have it go red when it's not connected, and then I'm going to have it do this green, this 1024 color, when it is connected. I'll send that code up from the Arduino to change the color on this radio button, but I'll have to change both the BCO and the PCO. And you can see the BCO is the background color and the PCO is the foreground color. And then I have 2 buttons. And I'm going to use my same format on this as I do for all of my code that goes between the Nextion and the Arduino. I'm going to send the C:C and then a 3-character command, and then some sort of a value, and then a question mark. For the connect button, I'm going to have the commands. I'm going to send print C:C, and then CON will be my command. And then I'm going to have to smash 2 things together. I'm going to send the cbo.text, which is going to be the network I want to connect to, a colon, and then I'm going to send the password. So if your password has a colon in it, or your SSID has a colon in it, this won't work. So I'm doing this just for now. If I was really doing it for a test, I would probably make my delimiter in between something larger. After the colon, I'm going to send the text from the T0 field, which will be the password, and then I'll end it with a question mark. For the button that's going to gather the SSIDs, it's just C:C and then get GET, and then the value doesn't matter in this. I won't be checking that, but I always put a value. In this case, I'm going to put 10 and then the question mark. And that's all there is to this. All of the updating will come from the Arduino. And then just to make sure I have it working, I'm going to run it here in debug. I'll change this to a string. When I hit connect, it's C:C and then CON, and then 1, which is what's in the combo box, a colon, and then password, which is in the password field, and then a question mark. When I do the get, it's 10, or it's C:C, GET, 10, and then question mark. If I change this password, I have to delete it first. I always hate that about this, and there is a way to have it be empty when you go into it. But for now, we'll just put DEL. Okay. And now we'll click this again, and it should be 1 and then DEL. So everything looks like it's functioning. So I'm going to upload this to the display, and then I'm going to go back over to the Arduino, and we'll start the first step of gathering the SSIDs. Now before I do anything in the Arduino, I have the serial port running, and I have the Arduino or the Nextion connected. If I press the buttons, I should get something now. And you can see I got get :10, and I got connection :1 password, and that get :10 and the con : that's built into my standard code, and you'll see that in a minute. We were in the delay tab. Now we're going to go over to the input, and I have this command in here where if command equals CMD, and I just have that as a test. But up above here, I'm serial print lining the command and the value. And up above this, I separate the two out. I separate the command from the value so I can use it further down. I have another video on that, and that should be in the description if you want to go back and review. So I'm going to change this generic command I have in here for the get one. So now if command equals get, the first thing I'm going to do if the command is equal to get is I'm going to print scanning up on the display. If you're not familiar with XSTR, it's just a command that will just print text up on the screen. And the first four variables say where you want to place it. Then the fifth one is the font, and then the color of the font, and then after that there's a background color and some other variables that let you pick the background. But as long as you put this 3 where I have it, there won't be a background, and then the text you want to print. And then we're going to get the number of networks that are available. If you do that Wi-Fi.scan networks, it doesn't bring back anything, it just brings back the current number of networks or SSIDs that the ESP32 can see. Then after we get the number of networks, we're going to have a string called SSIDs, and we're going to store them in this string. And we're going to count through the networks. Since we know the number, the networks are actually 0 based. We have integer I is going to be equal to 0, and then we're going to count up through the networks as long as I is less than n. And then for the first line in there, if I is greater than 0, we're going to print that /r/n. And that's what you need for the path on the combo box. You need that /r/n to separate the lines on the combo box. And by using the if statement, I greater than 0, we're only going to add it to the lines 1 through 5 instead of 0. And then the variable SSIDs is going to store the name of the SSID. And then we're going to print the SSID on our local monitor. So we'll collect them, we'll add them to the SSID string, and then we'll print them. And then we're going to write to the Nextion display. And there on that combo box you have the text, which is displayed when you first go to the page or you first see the combo box. And that's just a one-word thing. And in this case, we're going to print the number of networks and then the word networks. So you should see the number that we've collected. And then the next field that we need to pay attention to in the combo box is the path. And that's where we load all of the SSIDs in, separated by that /r/n. And so we'll write that up to the Nextion next. And then finally we have to erase that message that we put up on the Nextion that says we're scanning for SSIDs. And really what you're doing is you're overwriting it. So in this case you'll notice that all the values are the same except for instead of black we have white, so it'll overwrite it to the background. The word will still be up there, it'll just be the same color as the background. I'm going to upload this version right here and show it to you. We won't be connecting to the networks, but I'll show you that we can collect the networks. I have the display pulled up here, and then I have the serial monitor behind it, and I'll go between the two to show you what we're doing. I'm going to clear the output on this, then we'll go to the display. I'm going to hit Get SSIDs. And you can see that it says scanning, and it says Get 10. And here it shows up the displays, or the SSIDs that I'm getting. And it shows up here that we have 5 networks. And now when I click on it, it should show the networks. What I find interesting is that XSTR, it doesn't completely overwrite it. So I wrote it in black, and then when you go to write it in white, it still kind of shows up in there. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video or not, but you can see like the outer edges of it. And now you can see the networks. I'm going to connect to engineering for now. So now we have engineering selected, and the password for that is test. So now if I hit the word connect, the engineering and test should go up to the serial monitor. And you can see we got it engineering and then test. Now we're not doing anything with it yet, but we'll look at that next. The interesting thing is you see that this went to status 6. So it goes to this status 6 pretty much when I did the when I collected the SSIDs. So it goes from that 255 to an actual value when you do something with the ESP itself. So now we're going to add to this the second command. And in this case, it's if command equals CON. And if it does have the CON, we know in the value, we're going to have two values within the value. We're going to have the SSID itself and the password separated by a colon. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to get the colon location. So we find the index of the colon. Then we know the SSID name is going to be equal to the substring of 0 to the colon. In other words, the first portion of it. And for the SSID password, we know it's going to be the rest of the string. So it's going to be the colon location plus 1 to the end of the string. And if you leave the second value off of the substring command, it just takes the rest of the characters. And then finally, we Wi-Fi begin, which opens up the connection to the SSID you've chosen and uses the password that you've chosen. And I have to do that .c_str, which turns it into a character string. So we're going to upload this and show it to you. And in this case, I just left the values populated, so we should be able to just hit the connect. And we're going to go over to this screen over here, and we should see if it connects. And the way we'll know it connects is if we get a good status and a good IP address, which we did. A lot of times I won't get it the first time, it takes another pass. But in this case, I'm going to try to connect to the cheap controls network with the password of controls. Now in order for this to work, when I hit the connect, it's going to have to disconnect from engineering and reconnect to cheap controls. And like I said, I've never tried this, so we'll see how it goes. No matter what, I'm going to leave it in the video, so we'll see what happens. Now that's the old IP address, that 192.168.4.2, because even though it says cheap controls, you have to give it a minute to change. And it looks like it connected. I got a new address, 192.168.1.38. So it looks like you can dynamically switch between networks. I wasn't sure if I'd have to disconnect and then reconnect, or if it would just work as smoothly as it did. So that's great. So it looks like I win this round there, Mr. Editor. The only thing we have left is I want to change this light up here so that it'll change from a red to a green based upon the connection state. We're going to do that over in the delay. And remember, I have this line down here, if Wi-Fi status equals something. Well, in this case, if it equals 3, we want it to be green. If it equals anything else, we want it to be red. So if Wi-Fi status equals 3, we're going to take that R0, and we're going to change the PCO and the BCO and turn them to green, because that was that 1024, which we noticed when we were setting it up. And any other time, we're going to make it the red, 63488. So I'm going to upload this, and this will pretty much be the final step, except for I do want to show you there is an error state that I found out that you could check for. So now I should just push that connect button, and it should connect and give us an indication with a green light. We'll go back here and check. We got the cheap controls. And we got a green light. I'm going to change the password. So now it just says cheap control. Oh, and it went to red already. Well, let's set it back and make sure that we don't have a problem. I'll wait 10 seconds for this to go through again, and we'll go back and make sure it's still green. It's still green. We'll go to engineering and we'll connect. And it went to red. So that's correct because engineering has the different password, test. Now this time it should connect. Having that 10-second delay in update can cause some weird things, because if it updates right away, if I catch it right at like 9th second, sometimes it changes quicker than you think, and sometimes it takes longer than you think. So if you're really doing this for an application, you'd probably have that a much quicker update. But it seems as if it's working fine. There is one thing though with this. If I try to connect to a network that doesn't exist, so what I've done is I've rebooted the Nextion display, and there is no network called 1. So I'm going to connect to it. And you can see that it didn't, because it doesn't exist. Now if I go get the SSIDs, when you get that -2 networks, that's just a state you should check for, and then you can do a reset. But if I were to simply reboot the Nextion, it would fix it. So that is an error state that you need to take into consideration and look out for. But for the most part, if you're connecting automatically or you're populating it and finding current networks, you should be okay. But the main focus of this video was to show you how to connect dynamically to different networks, and it seems to work very well. I'm pretty pleased with the way the ESP32 can go between two networks. Just to quickly go over what we did, we included this Wi-Fi library, and we set up 2 strings, SSID name and SSID password. And that's pretty much all we had to do on this opening page to get the Wi-Fi to work. Then in this delay loop, what we do is every once in a while, or every 10 seconds, you could change that to 1 second, we print out the SSID name, we look and get the IP address printed out, and print out the status. Then we also added a little thing here based upon the status. We can change the color of a something on the display. To remember, it doesn't have to be that round LED. It could be like the name itself. Like I'm having trouble connecting to cheap controls or something like that. You could change the font color. We use 2 different input commands. We use the get, G-E-T, and con for connection. In the get, we collect the individual SSIDs and populate that combo box. We also print out a little word scanning, and then we remove that scanning when we're done. Under the connection, we connect to the network based upon the data that we've collected. In the next video, I'm going to show how to do this through a web page. So you'll connect to the network, it'll have an IP address, then you'll go over to a browser, connect to that IP address, and it will populate the browser with some little message, like maybe we'll turn on and off the onboard LED or something like that, or turn off and on a motor or something fun. It would be interesting to show how to send HTML from the ESP to a browser. Well, that's about it for this video. If you like what you saw, consider giving me a thumbs up, and also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.